Michelle Kuchar will be working on that. I'll do a little bit more on private schools. And then we have someone from the fiscal unit that will be going over fiscal changes. Not very many changes, but just reminders, as we always need our reminders on how we can do all of our function codes correctly and what we need to remember fiscally, so that we can eliminate modifications. We also have a special supplemental activity on writing good requests. And I'll ask one of the team or Laura if that was sent and already in the Bitly. So if you want to go over again some really good hints, it's an activity that you can do, looking at some requests and critiquing them and what's good about those or what could I do better. So again, trying to eliminate the need for back and forth between us that take up the time. And then at the very end is a very complete OES contact information with the latest email numbers that you need to contact all of us at MDE that you might need to speak with. Thank you, Laura. You can move ahead. Okay, I'm going to talk about timelines and what is meant by substantially approvable submissions. Next. Okay, this should have already happened. Some of you get some very small grants like Title V or other smaller grants, and you should have been notified already if you become ineligible for any sub-grants. That should have happened already from fiscal. Estimated allocations are up, so those are on our website. Again, you can look at those to help you plan and consult with your private schools. Final allocations, they always come later after everything's worked out in September in the fall. And then the Public School Academy adjustments, the new and expanding Public School Academy adjustments will be up in February, next winter. Okay, next. Obligation date. Now everybody needs to understand what an obligation date is. And this is this is really strict fiscal protocol. And that is, if you want to be able to spend your funding starting in July during the summer, let's say you have professional development or you have some summer school that you want to get started, or staffing, you must submit your Title I school selection and the consolidated application in substantially approvable form on or before July 1st. We'll talk a little minute about what substantially approvable looks like. And the budget must reflect the 2021 program year. So that means they want you to really work with your teams, virtually, of course, now, on making sure that you have everything planned that needs to be planned, and also that that you also have all your programs there and your funding spent, your funding allocated. For LEAs, then if you, let's say, some districts don't have anything going in July and there's people that have planned vacations or something, then that is, if let's say you do it July 8th, then your obligation date will be July 8th, the date of submission, whenever you submit in MEGS Plus. Well, let's go on and I'll explain a little bit more. So an obligation date is really the date that you have that you can start spending. So you have, and we're reminding you to don't risk your obligation date. You can lose your obligation date if, for example, we send back to you in July your submission and there's a few modifications that need to be made, and sometimes we get people leave or people get reassigned, and then we don't hear from you for months. And so that can mean that you lose that obligation date and you have to, when you actually submit your modifications, again, that would be your new obligation date. We hardly ever do that. We don't want to do that, but we want to make sure that the money is going out. So superintendents always request, please get the money back to us as fast as you can. And I'm sure you all hear that and you know that too. So after 30 days, this has always been a protocol, but not always, you don't always get formal letters. So this year there will be letters reminding you to resubmit your applications. And if you don't submit 15 days after receiving those letters, that can jeopardize your initial obligation date. You would get a new one. So we really don't want to do that. It's extra paperwork for everybody. And so we're asking everyone to be as prompt as they can, especially in this year where money is, funding is needed as soon as possible. So that's your notification of that. Please get those in within 30 days. We get them back to you within 30 days, and hopefully the money will move. The district plan or single building district improvement plan has been submitted. That's part of what we call substantially approvable. So the 2019-2020 DIPS will be accepted for application submissions. So usually we say you must have this and this and this and this in your DIPS done. Adjustments will be allowed in the fall to reflect 2021 budgets and plans. So they've been accepted already to move things along even more quickly. All of the things that you always have to look for and make sure those are all done in the DIP, that they have been done, then they're approved. Title I school selection has been completed and submitted. Sometimes new people forget that the Title I, the TIS has to come in with a consolidated application. When we review them, we have to make sure that the TIS aligns with the consolidated app, and what you said you were going to do in the TIS is what you did in the consolidated app. So we can't even begin checking anything until you submit both. So just a reminder for new people. And we'd also like to say, if there's anybody new out there or you're getting a replacement, please, make sure they have our numbers and emails that they can call us and we can help them get through this. And the other thing that we always say that will be enforced as ever is that the auditors and fiscal and the legislators, and the intent of the legislation is that the money that you're getting is to be used for this school year for these and teachers. So it is expected that you will apply for all of that. Of course, sometimes things happen and you don't get to spend it all, but you are required to apply for 100% of the allocations that you receive. Some people like to say, I'm going to save it till I see what happens. No, first time it is to be planned. You can change it at amendment time. That's why we have an amendment time, excuse me, in November, December, but you need to allocate and budget 100% of all of the allocations that you receive. Next. The program evaluation tool is no longer required to be submitted in Assist or Cognia, so you do not have to submit it. But remember, all federal and state programs must still be evaluated on an annual basis. And you are required to maintain documentation of evaluations. It does not have to be the PET tool. If you like that, if it's easy for you, that's fine. But you are still required to evaluate by state and federal law. Okay, next. Question break already. All right. So who's going to review for me the questions, and we'll try to answer those as a team.
I just wanted to say, John Zollner, I did send you the bit.ly. I shared it with you by email. I know you said you were having trouble getting in. try to go to my email. You should be able to open it through there.
Got it.
Hi Gail, did you have a question or did you get it answered?
It doesn't appear that we're able to answer individual people on this. It must be a security thing. So I don't think Gail did get her answer.
I did.
Oh, you did? Okay, sorry. Oh,
Somebody
Andrew.
wrote back and said, yep. So I'm good. Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, any other questions? This part of the presentation, not too many, mostly reminders to you as you go through to make things go quickly. And
Well, I do want to repeat Gail's question out loud because I thought it was a good question. She wanted a clarification that activities may be the same, but the budget amounts may be different in the CA and in our 1920 DIP. Is that okay? And yes, that's okay. We don't look at amounts in DIP. We just look at what the goals and strategies and the activities. We don't look at amounts. So
yeah, that's really for your planning purposes.
Mhm.
Your planning purposes, and then we just look at the amounts. You're right, Michelle. So we don't hold that, if you put some amount in and it's not exactly right, don't worry about going back every single, it's a planning document. So we won't make you redo that work in the DIP, Assist or Cognio. Okay, Andrea, are you ready?
I am ready. Good morning, everybody. My name's Andrea Nessel, and I work with all the districts in Berrien, Cass, St. Joe, and Van Buren counties. And I see a lot of my people on here today. So good to see your names. I wish I could see you in person to say hello. Hopefully that will happen soon. So I'm going to talk about the changes in the TIS for this year. So go ahead, Laura. One of the biggest changes is the fact that we no longer have two different types of TIS. There's not a short form and a long form anymore. There's just one form that everybody will do. The main reason behind that is that we need to ensure full adherence to the legislative requirements and collect all the data that's needed for federal reporting requirements. We weren't doing this when we had the short version of the TIS. We weren't able to collect all that data and adhere to what our requirements were. So if you were used to doing the short TIS before, especially if you were a district that got to click those two boxes and really didn't have to do anything with the TIS, don't panic. We will help you through this. Another thing I really want to stress, and this is going to be more important than ever this year, is you need to use the help screens. My suggestion would be to go ahead and print out the help screens to have them next to you, or if you have two screens, have your help screens on one screen while you work on the TIS and the consolidated application on another screen, and use that help screen step by step. I've said this before, a ton of the questions that I get when I answer them, I'm actually reading the answer right from the help screen. So it's not that we don't want you calling us and asking us questions, we certainly do, but we can probably save you a lot of time and headache by directing you to the help screen first. You probably can get a lot of your questions answered that way. So it'll take you through it step by step, but we can help you as well. The only difference will be if you are a district with less than 1,000 students, one of the screens on the TIS will not appear for you. And I'll mention that as we go forward. Okay, we can go on to the next one. So the first screen in the TIS is the grade span grouping screen. You used to be able to opt out of this, some of you, and you can't anymore. Everyone will have to do this. So you're gonna pick the grade spans that are the best fit for your district. Just a reminder that screens 1 and 2 of the TIS will be locked at amendment time. You can't go back and make changes to screens 1 and 2. All right, screen 2 on the TIS, data on schools in the district. So once again, your fall count data will be pre-populated. You can see there in column 2A. Excuse me. The reason for that is it is the most accurate count data. Once you submit your count data, it goes through several filters at the state. I'm not going to go through all those right now. If you want more details on that, you can get a hold of your consultant. But once it goes through all those filters, you get your true FTE count. And so we want you to be using that accurate count. The only exception to that is going to be if you have gone through a reconfiguration, or if you've had significant changes in enrollment between the fall and spring count. If one of those apply to you, you can use your spring count. And you can see right here on the screen above the chart, you have 2 check boxes. So what will happen is in the chart under total enrollment, the number that you put in 2B should match 2A. If it doesn't, that means you're using your spring count data and you must check one of the boxes above. You'll get an error message if you don't. I'll remind you again that if you pull certain reports from your district, they might not match what the fall count looks like, because again, your district probably hasn't put those other filters on it in order to get your true fall count. So keep that in mind. We had a lot of questions about that last year, saying, well, at my district, the fall count says this, but this is what is uploaded in the TIS. This is all accurate information coming right from CEPI. Okay, next screen. This is really important. It used to be if you had private schools participating, you would put those numbers, those student count numbers for the private schools in on this screen. You need to put zeros, no matter if you have private schools participating or not. This is going to go against what the directions tell you. The reason for that is MEGS had already gone through all the changes and all, we had already loaded all the rules into MEGS when we found this to be an issue, and it was too late to change it in MEGS. So if you put private school count numbers in this screen, we will need to send it back to you for modifications. So keep that in mind. Put all zeros in the TIS for private schools. The only place you'll enter private school enrollment information and count information will be in the Equitable Services worksheet. The only place, not in the TIS. Okay, screen 3 is the ranking methodology. This is the screen that won't show up for you if you are a district with less than 1,000 students, because if you're a district with less than 1,000 students, all of your buildings are automatically eligible. If you have more than 1,000 students, this will show for you, and there are 3 steps that you'll take on this screen. These steps are outlined on this slide, but I'm actually going to go to the next slide to talk through them, because it's a screenshot of that ranking methodology screen. So if screen 3 shows for you, you've got 3 steps to take here. The first step, well, as you know, if you have any buildings that are 75% or more low income, those will need to be served first. They will come up, they will pop to the top in ranking. You have an option, and this was new as of, I think as of last year, I don't think it was 2 years ago, that you have the option, if you have any high schools that are 50% or more low income, you can serve those before the 75% low income buildings. I don't believe Team 2 had any LEAs choose this option last year. We had very few around the state choose this option, but you certainly can. You don't have to. So if you choose to, you're going to check this box in step 1. Step 2 is your grouping method. So you are going to determine if you are going to group your eligible schools by district or by grade span. So if this is new to you, you probably have the question, well, which one is best? That's really up to you. You can play around with it if you would like and see, well, if I choose district-wide, this is how my schools show up in rank and serve and who I have to serve first. If I choose grade span and I can pick the grade spans I serve, this shows up. Keep in mind on this screen, you'll see the example where this person chose grade span grouping and they chose K4 and 5-8. So they want to serve the K4 and 5-8 grade spans. Keep in mind though, if you have any buildings that are 75% low income or above in the 9-12 grade span under this option, they are going to show up as a school you have to serve. You can always skip them if you want to and serve them with 31A funds. But again, use the help screen and talk to your consultant. Your consultant can help talk you through why you might want one option or the other. Step 3, just go back one slide for me for a second. Thanks, Laura. Step 3 is an option if you would like to choose, if you would like any school with a low income percentage of 35 or above to be eligible, you can click this box and then it'll pull in all those schools that are 35% low income or more. Okay, so now we're gonna pause for a quick second for questions. So Laura, do we have any questions in the chat?
None right now.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move on. If you end up with questions on those first 3 screens of the TIS, feel free to put them in the chat. As we go along too, throughout the whole presentation, if you think of a question based on a previous part of the presentation, don't hesitate to put that in the chat. Okay, so screen 4 will show for everybody. And this is where you identify the Title I status of all the eligible schools. We've added options. You used to mark your schools as school-wide or targeted, but we've added 2 options, either skipped or unfunded. If you have 1,000 or more students, you will be required to serve in rank order, and you cannot mark a higher ranked school unfunded. So if you had 2 elementary schools and one was 60% low income and one was 55% low income, you could not choose to unfund the 60% low income elementary school. This example that you see here for screen 4, this LEA chose the district-wide grouping. So if that's the case, they could only choose to unfund the lowest percent, the building in the entire district with the lowest percent low-income students. Okay, so you can see that in the example here. So if we go to the next screen, that's an example of a district that chose the school grouping, the grade span grouping method. And you can see here then, it's chunking all their buildings by grade span. And in this case, if they wanted to, they could choose to not fund the lowest in each of the grade spans. So here they've chose to not fund the lowest elementary school and the lowest high school. So this is another example of why your grouping method is important, because there are different things you can and can't do based on your grouping method. And again, don't be afraid to play around with it. Save the screens, go back and change something, save it again, and kind of see what happens with the rank and serve of your buildings and match that to your needs. Okay, so going on to screen 5, this screen, some of you that did do the short TIS, this looks similar to a screen that you had to do as well. So this is what the old screen used to look like. Rows E through H are going to go away. So this is the old version. So if you click over to the next slide, you can see that the new version eliminates the need to check the box that was on the previous screen. So that box that was checked, you used to have the option that if all of your buildings were 35% or more low income, you could check a box and you could determine the per pupil amount. That option, well, the option for you to choose the amount is going to go away. It's still there. What's going to happen is if all of your buildings are 35% or more low income, it's automatically on screen 6 going to give you the option to set your per pupil amount at a penny or more. So that flexibility is still there. It's just, we don't need it to show up in this screen anymore. We're just opening up that flexibility for everybody with 35% or more poverty in all of their buildings. The key to screen 5 is to make sure that the numbers, the amounts that you've put in screen 5 match identically to the amounts in your Title 1A budget in the consolidated application. This is probably, screens 5 and 6 not matching the application is probably one of the number one reasons why I send applications back, and my colleagues would probably say the same thing, that this is towards the top of their list. So, and sometimes what happens too is as you're working on the consolidated application, you might suddenly realize, oh shoot, I do need to give this building a little more because they're doing this. And then you forget to go to the TIS and check and make sure that that has happened. You really need to be doing the TIS first, because the TIS determines everything you do in the Title I budget in the consolidated application. So you need to determine the amounts you need to give each of the buildings in the TIS, and then go to the application, and those are the numbers that you need to budget. So please do a double check to make sure all those numbers match before you hit that submit button. Also remember, at amendment time, you need to update all those amounts. Again, I end up sending a lot of amendments back because the numbers in the TIS don't match the numbers in the Title I budget. A lot of times too, I won't fully review the Title I budget, because if I start approving items, I have to go back, and because I flag budget items, I have to go back and open them back up for you. So one of the first things I check is to make sure there's that alignment there. And if there's not, I'll need to send it back to you. Okay, then screen 6, this is the screen where we see the allocation to school attendance areas. This is where you will need to allocate an amount per pupil. In the past, if you did the short TIS, you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to specify a per pupil amount. Everyone now has to specify a per pupil amount. So in order for me to kind of explain what's on this screen, Laura, let's go to the next screen so you can actually see what screen 6 looks like. So on this screen, you can see in column 4 in that table, that's where you're going to put the per pupil amount. In this example, you can see that this LEA has all of its buildings have a poverty level of 35% or more, a low income level of 35% or more. So if you look at that smaller chart above the larger chart, you can see that their minimum per low income pupil is 1 penny. So that flexibility was brought in there. So you'll first need to take a look and see what your minimum amount per low income pupil is, and make sure that you're meeting that minimum amount. Again, if you have less than 1,000 students, you can serve your schools in any order that you wish. But if you have more than 1,000 students, you are going to rank and serve based on the grouping method you chose, whether it's the district or the school grouping method. If you selected to have all your high schools containing grade 12 with a poverty percentage of 50% or more served, those will come to the top of your list. Okay, I think that's all I have for that. So if you choose back on the screen where you had to identify the title status of each of your buildings, if you are choosing to skip a school and serve them, still give them a Title 1A like program, but doing it with 31A funds instead. Let's say you want to keep some of those Title 1A funds for some other buildings. I personally end up seeing this happen with middle schools and high schools or virtual high schools quite a bit. Then you're going to skip that school and serve them with 31A funds. Here's the key, and I think this has been a common misunderstanding. A lot of times when you choose to do this, this is for a school who already has had 31A funds funneled to them. You can't put in this screen what you're already doing with 31A funds. You have to use 31A funds to create a Title 1A like program, not something that's already been established with 31A. This is to create a Title 1A like program. So you still have to meet the intent and purpose of Title 1A. This screen will look a little different. This used to be what was called Screen 8 in the old TIS, but it's now Screen 7. This will look a little bit different. This is going to actually look like a budget screen you'd see in the consolidated application. So you're going to have to write these budget items in the same manner in which we expect it to be written in the budget, in the Title 1A budget in the application. If you look on this slide here at the second bullet where it says TIS budget details must align with the consolidated application budget details, what that means is if we expect a certain level of detail in your Title 1A budget, you need to put that level of detail here. So you can see in this example, in the budget detail, it says that they want 1 FTE of a 31A intervention teacher, and it states what that teacher is going to be doing. And they have to give the correct function code. They have to use the correct column, salaries, benefits. They had to use the FTE column. You will get 15 budget lines per school that you've skipped. So you'll be able to load in up to 15 different budget items here. I think that's all from me. Well, we're going to do one more slide. Our foster care consultant, Kathleen Haney, is on with us today. This slide was put along with the TIS slides because you are able to budget some money for foster care transportation, and I'll let Kathleen talk about that.
Good morning. My name is Kathleen. Thank you, Andrea. My name is Kathleen, and I am the foster consultant for the Michigan Department of Ed in the Office of Educational Supports. Within the TIS, there has been a new help screen that was, or help paragraph that was added as districts are considering whether or not they want to use Title I Part A funds to pay for some of the foster transportation. So if a district does decide to set aside any funds, it would be on screen 5, row 13, where you would identify that amount. We know that fall may be a question mark around transportation, and in planning, it might be better to put something, excuse me, aside rather than need to go back during amendment time. So all students who are experiencing foster care are eligible to receive all approved Title and 31A services, regardless of the building that they are attending. So if a district decides to allocate funds to particular buildings and you have a student who is attending a non-participating building, those students are still eligible to receive all approved services. So we have been training across the state to foster care liaisons and counselors and anyone else who has attended that it's important to identify those students and to assure that, especially now during this time with distance learning plans, that students are receiving those services. All students who are experiencing foster care are eligible for free meals. Once they have a case that is opened, it is important to know that they are automatically eligible to receive all free meals, including the added pandemic EBT benefits that equal roughly $200 a month more per student. So that's $50 a week per student per family. LEAs can create this list by using the direct certification student roster report and filtering on the foster column. That is the most recent list that districts have for students who are experiencing care. And it is encouraged that when a district enters, enrolls, or disenrolls a student, that they complete that activity by completing a SRM or student record maintenance following that activity. Otherwise, that role will not be updated within your district until the next count is certified. So with that, I'll step off and be available if there are any questions. Thank you.
Great. That gave me a chance to look at the questions too. We had a great question about if you skip a school, do you need to serve the private students, the private school students? And the answer is yes. And Shelley, you said you wanted to talk more about that.
If you take a look at the Equitable Services worksheet on the District Information tab, the instructions will tell you to serve the skipped school. So there was some confusion about that in the past. So that's the only reason I wanted to bring it up, is if you skip a school, it is still considered title eligible. Therefore, you still have to serve the kids, private school eligible kids in that building. It's a newer finding, and it is in the directions. The other question that I wanted to clarify from Donna Rummel was, she asked if she had a high school that was 75% and over. I told her she had two options. She could serve it as a targeted title building this first year, or she could skip it and use 31A funding to serve it. She asked what do they need to do to become school-wide. There's still the requirement to have a year of planning to become school-wide. So there is an intent to transfer form on our website, but you can work with your consultant on that, and they can walk you through that process.
It may not be up quite yet. I think they were working on it a couple days ago. I asked Fred and he said it wasn't quite ready, but they might have it out.
Also, I had a private email that asked if the 2020-2021 application and TIS were ready yet. And
It's not. I confirmed that it's not.
Right. You confirmed that earlier. Does anybody know when it will be ready?
No, they're still waiting to fix a
Glitch?
glitch, for lack of a better term.
So we're still there. Okay.
Yeah,
You
they're
were on the committee, so.
yeah, they're trying to get it done as quickly as possible. We all know how quick technology can work for us sometimes. So, but yeah, their goal is to get it as quickly as possible. They'd like to get it up and running this week. So we can all four of us could send a blast out to all of you to let you know as soon as it's live, so that you can initiate your application if you'd like. I'm sure you're all itching to do that. I think those were the only other questions. So Kathleen Haney's contact information will be on the final contact slides. If you'd like to speak with her more about foster care, she's a great help and would be more than happy to speak with you. And that's all for the fun TIS part.
All right.
Hand it over to Shelley for more fun and games.
More fun, yeah. So this is Shelley Patton. I'm also part of Team 2, and I cover Muskegon, Ottawa, and Allegan County. And I'm going to go over the updates to the consolidated application. We do not have as many changes as the TIS, so that's always a positive thing. The first thing I'd like to talk to you about is the equitable access screen. For those of you that have done this in the past, you remember that screen changed last year. Michigan wasn't quite handling the equitable access requirement the way we should have been. So we've updated that, and we spent some more time trying to clarify even more this year. Please make sure that you look at the help screens. We have updated that. If you go to the view edit and go to the help documents, you will see that we've given you some examples of how to handle this page. Okay, go on to the next screen, please. So equitable access highlights 6 types of barriers, and those barriers include gender, race, national origin, color, disability, or age. So the federal government is asking you to identify barriers that could hinder student, staff, and parent equitable access to federally funded programs and activities. Go ahead to the next screen. Common types of barriers for students could be anything from gender, race, color, origin, disability, age. We're not asking that you list all of your barriers. We realize there are many. Just pick a barrier or two that you know that your district has come up with a plan to eliminate that barrier. So in this case, you might say one of you are trying to carry out a science model for secondary students, and you're concerned that the girls may be less likely to participate than the boys. So you could tell us that and tell us what your plan is to eliminate that barrier. Go ahead to the next screen. As for staff, you can have the same issues: gender, race, color, national origin, disability, age. Could be policies or procedures in place that are discriminatory towards any of those. In this case, you could be putting something in place because you want to hire staff to provide your federally funded services, but you might be able to describe the hiring practices and the accommodations that are there so that there aren't any discriminatory practices and that you have eliminated the barriers to hiring. Next. When it comes to parents, there may be the same issues. A lot of times with parents, because of the national origin, there may be a language barrier. Many of you have this in your districts. So you might want to explain to us that you're doing a parental outreach activity and that some parents may be speaking another language, and you can describe to us how you are eliminating that barrier, whether you're providing a translator or translating documents, and then you can show us that elimination. Next. Okay, so again, last year, over a year ago now, MDE as a whole has been working together with the Accounting Code Office on function codes and function code updates. We are encouraging you to please use the Accounting Code Manual when picking the appropriate function code. Within our office, we are working on consistency so that all of our consultants, there are 20 of us, and we realize there are inconsistencies sometimes, but we are working very hard to be on the same page when it comes to function codes. So we wanted to highlight some that we had started working with last year, and then there are some new highlights for this year. So if you're looking at basic programs, we have a lot more flexibility now with title funding. If you have some basic programs, you're going to use function codes 111 for elementary, 112 for middle school, and 113 for the high school. Occasionally, that can happen in a targeted building. That would take a prorated amount. You would work with your consultant on this. This is a new part of the flexibility in Title I. Remember, just because you have, say, 80% of your kids are at risk of failing, doesn't mean that we will allow you to charge 80% of, say, calculators to the title program in a targeted situation. A typical targeted program should only be serving 20 to 25% of your kids at most. Therefore, the proration will be limited to that. Typically, these function codes are used in a school-wide setting for a basic program. You may have after-school clubs and, of course, field trips for kids. We do want you to use those 100 function codes for those activities. Occasionally, there may be a field trip that is specific to a very small group of children. That could still be a 125, but work with your consultant on that. Dual enrollment. There are requirements for dual enrollment that the state has in place, and you can use title funds, Title I or Title IV, to help with dual enrollment if necessary. Just work with your consultant to make sure that we're meeting all the requirements that are there. And remember, in Title I, you may have a little more flexibility actually than in Title IV. Next. Summer school was a clarification we made last year. Occasionally, everyone was using function code 119 for summer school, which that is the case if you're offering a grade level wide or a school wide summer school, and it's offered to everyone in a school wide setting. Anyone can come. It's just, here's summer school. That would be a function code 119. However, if you have a summer school, again, to a specific group of students, only allowing the specific group to attend, that is still going to be a function code 125. That was a decision that was made by the accounting code group. In general, many of you use function code 125 for your compensatory education. These are targeted assistance, targeted programs. Even targeted programs in your school-wide building will be a function code 125. Function code 216 in the past was always used for social workers, which it still is used for social workers, but it is also now being used for any behavioral needs you have. So if you have positions or programs related to behavior, like a behavior specialist, a behavior interventionist, PBIS programs, restorative practices, or climate and culture initiatives, we're asking that everyone uses a function code 216. Next. Function code 219 is one that kind of popped out for us when we were working with Title IV as it became available. This is a monitoring function code. So occasionally in Title IV, you will see a need for health and safety. And so you might have a lunchroom or hall or playground monitors. If you can show the need and it's a health and safety need for that, and it is a supplementary need, you could use a function code 219 in Title IV. Occasionally, this can be done as well in Title I, especially in a school-wide program. But remember, if you do have bus monitoring, the bus monitoring will still fall under a 271 for transportation. And again, that was confirmed with the accounting code office. In the past, we were not allowing you to use Title I or Title II for professional memberships, but that has also changed. So if you have a professional membership, and that membership will provide resources to the member or additional professional development opportunities or things such as that, then we will allow that now. And it will be a function code 221 for any instructional staff that may be joining the membership, or a 283 for non-instructional staff joining the membership. Now remember, a new learning we had last year as well, payments to other ISDs or other school districts or entities will go to the object code called other expenses, that's 7,000, 8,000, and that is the case with this professional membership. Any payments to your ISDs or any payments to another school district will go to object code 7,000, 8,000 for other expenses. This next one about administrative cost, I'm just going to say it right here. This row is a little confusing and I apologize for that. You can ignore the part about transferring to and for and all that. In general, there are several function codes that are considered administrative cost. And what I want to say about that is that remember that there is a limit on the amount of administrative cost you can have depending on the funding source. Title I and II can be up to 10%, but you have to work with your consultant on that. That administrative cost also includes your indirect costs that you may be taking right off the top. But other functions or other funding sources such as Title III and Title IV have a limit of 2%. So keep that in mind. Again, using the accounting code manual to help you with this and working with your consultant to really know and understand which function codes would be considered administrative. And the other thing that gets confusing here is that occasionally there'll be what's considered an administrative type code in your school level budget. But remember to work with your consultants on that, because if it's appropriate and can be in your school level budget, it will not count towards your limit of administration in Title I. So work with your consultants, please. In Title II, there are some recruitment and retention allowabilities there for both principals and teachers. First thing to keep in mind is if you're doing principal recruitment and retention, it's a function code 241. If it's teacher recruitment and retention, it's a function code 283. There are details for this. You must work with your consultants on this because we must get management approval. We cannot approve this without our managers reviewing your plan and letting us know. So this is something that if you think you want to do for next year, you need to be working on your plan soon and getting that to us so that we can review it and get it to our manager. And we know everyone's super busy right now. Next. Function code 297 was also a clarification we started to make last year, and we're hoping to keep moving in that same direction. This has to do with food services. Many of you, of course, are offering summer programs, after-school programs, and you offer food or snacks for those programs. There's a bit of a confusion here. If your LEA staff is actually preparing the food for the pupils, so if there's an after-school meal or an after-school snack even, that your staff is preparing for them, please use the function code 297 for that snack or meal. However, if you have an after-school program and your teacher for after school is running to Sam's Club and purchasing juice boxes, crackers, those types of snacks, we would ask you to still continue to use a function code 125 for that program that you're offering. Again, if you're confused with that one, just work with your consultants. Function code 361 is for welfare needs. This often comes up for foster care or homeless students who need additional supplies. It could be glasses, graduation caps and gowns, supplies that they need for schools like backpacks, rulers, calculators, such as that. If that student needs those supplies to have equitable access to school and school activities, please use a function code 361. However, if you have an after-school program or a before school or even a during school program specific to a group of students, whether it's homeless, foster care, anything, and you're buying school supplies and those types of same type of school supplies, that though is different because you're offering a program, and that function code would be a 125 to fit the program. So there are two different types of academic supplies you may be purchasing. There could be a program supply, which would be a 125, or a welfare need, which would be a 361. Private schools, remember, everything that you budget for your private schools will be a function code 371, including things like professional learning. So it's very important that you write those details with a lot of detail, including all the information that we would want to look for, be very specific for us. And in some cases, I know some people upload a spreadsheet, which can be helpful. Next. Question break. Andrea, are there any questions?
Don had asked for if there a link to the accounting code manual. I put the link there, and then Michelle said a reminder that help screens have links in the consolidated application.
True.
That's it for questions so far.
Okay.
It's also help screen links in the TIS as well.
Oh, thank you, Michelle.
Okay. We can keep moving, Laura. All right, a few more function codes. These ones are newly clarified this year. We worked again as a group to come up with this around technology. We had actually even started this before our whole distance learning had started, which perfect timing actually. If you are using technology, the function code used for a technology, whether it's hardware or software purchase, will depend on an educational purpose and where the technology will be utilized by the students. So that's the part that some people get confused by. So if you look at the table below, you will see function codes, those basic program function codes again, the 100s. If you have a school-wide building and you're going to be doing this, whether it's a hardware or a software initiative, and it's going to be used in the entire classroom with all children as a basic program to supplement something else, this is the function code you will use. These could be student devices, the mobile carts that are in each grade level, classroom computer stations, and then classroom instructional software programs. Now again, that can be prorated in a targeted building, but you need to work with your consultant on that. If you're just using a single classroom, like a title classroom or a specialized classroom, or only small groups of students within the classroom will be using it. So it's an added needs for a specific population, then you're still going to use a 125. It's hardware or software during school, after school, before school, push in, pull out, supplemental supports with some type of technology is still a 125. If you have a computer lab that is set up fully with title funding, that lab then is there and people can check it out or sign up for certain times. That is a 225. So a 225 is just for a lab setting. So whatever you need for that lab, computers, printers, software, setting up of the lab, things like that, 225. Computer repairs, many of you know will have additional costs for computer repairs. That is a function code 261. And that doesn't matter where the computers live. Are they in the classroom? Are they a lab? It doesn't matter. If you need to set some money aside for computer repairs, please use the function code 261. Tablets, laptops, or desktops. Next. Professional development, again, we made some adjustments last year and we're just reminding you about what those adjustments are. So the position or role of the recipient of the professional development determines the function code for the professional development. That was again a confusion that I saw last year. Function code 221 will be used for instructional staff. So these are personnel that deliver the activities to the students. So teaching, parapros, support, things like that. Those are our instructional staff. Function code 283 will be used for any administrative, technical, logistical support, but 283 also includes coaches. Those coaches that actually coach the teachers or coach the principals are a function code 283. They are not instructing students, they are supporting adults. So please keep that in mind. So the next part of this is some of you have a contract with a PD that comes to your district. So it's a single charged professional development. If that is being provided in that way, please take a look at the entire group that's receiving the service and depending on the larger portion of that group. So if 80% of that group were instructional, please use function code 221. If 80% of that group were non-instructional, please use function code 283. However, number 3 is if it is an itemized charge, if it's a per person charge, please actually itemize this in your budget detail. So in some cases, you will have one professional development opportunity, but it may end up on more than one line. You may have a function code 221 for 10 teachers, but you may have the same professional learning on the 283 for 2 administrators. So professional learning can be complicated. It can require multiple lines for one professional learning. So please work with your consultants to ensure that we've got all the information we need to make this an easy review and easy approval for your funding. Next. So in the consolidated application, remember that we did update the participation of private schools screen, okay, last year. What we did do this year is we did update the calculation worksheet. Now, this can be a very confusing time right now. You are going to have 2 different calculation worksheets. There is this updated calculation worksheet for the consolidated application. And you also have the ESSER calculation worksheet that is in MEGS Plus, as well as I know I at least sent it to each of my contacts. So please keep those separate. There are 2 different calculations. We don't want to use the incorrect one for the incorrect application. My advice to you is you need to do your calculation worksheet first before you even try to complete your TIS, which then leads to your consolidated application. What I recommend to my districts is that they complete that calculation worksheet and contact me so that we can go over it to ensure that it is done correctly. If that worksheet is done incorrectly, all the numbers are off, which then therefore throws off the TIS and then therefore throws off the consolidated application, and all has to be returned for more work. So please work with your consultants on this. Now, in the updated calculation worksheet for this year for the consolidated application, it does now include Title III. This is new for some of you. There is some new learning. We do have some new documents on our website. Kelly, I know you're on. Could you please put the link to your website there? Hopefully Kelly will add that. If not, one of us will. There is new information here. Districts should be working with the private schools to ensure that they are identifying Title III students, whether they're EL, English learners, or immigrant. We would want to encourage the private schools to ask the same questions that we as the districts are allowed to ask. And then there is a way to submit those numbers in MSDS. This is a new learning for a lot of people. Don't panic. We will help you through this. We do have documents and helpful guides to help you through this process. Now, the other thing that is updated on this worksheet is we are showing you the differences in the indirect cost and the direct cost for administration. There are some error checks. I'm not going to go into great detail here. Please read the instructions on the worksheet and work with your consultant on that. But there is a difference between indirect cost and direct administrative cost, remembering that there are limits on the amount you can take. There also is some new information about the indirect cost that you can take from private schools, again, in the help screens. And also, if carryover is being budgeted, districts must ensure they utilize the carryover tab of the worksheet to properly allocate carryover to private schools if applicable. It's been made very clear to us over the last few years that the federal government wants the private school carryover to go back to the private schools. I know it's difficult sometimes, but we have to work on this. And especially this year with COVID-19 and everything that's happening, if the private school does not spend all their funding this year, that money will have to go back to the private schools at amendment time. And there is a carryover tab to help you with that.
Here, come here.
Okay. So again, remember to work with your consultant on that one because that can get a bit tricky. Okay. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Laura. Sorry.
Gotcha.
On the budget screens, it will pull forward your budgets from last year. So that's nice. But we do want you to update those. We want you to take a look at those, make sure those are still things. You may need to delete it completely. You may need to update it. You may need to change the language a bit, okay? So keep that in mind that those will pull forward, which will be nice. Title IV does have a new category. So it was a little problematic last year that we didn't have a primary use of funds as administrative cost. So it was difficult. We had to have a little workaround for those of you that had some administrative costs in Title IV. But we do have a drop down for that now. It is under primary use of funds. You can just pick administrative cost. But remember, Title IV is limited to 2% for administrative cost, and that does include your indirect cost. We do encourage that if you need administrative cost to first and foremost take your indirect cost at your indirect cost rate up to the allowable percentage of the funding source. Next. For those of you that have Title V, and there's not many of us left, it now includes a primary use of funds field. If many of you that remember Title V can be used like any other funding source. But we do have to have a report for that for the federal government. And in the past, we had an analyst in our office that was doing all that work by hand. So we asked for Megs Plus to work this in. The fund isn't really transferring, it's just being used like a different fund. So if you will see they have, you can use it like Title I, II, III, IV, or you can use it for parental involvement activities. Now, if you choose function code 125 for your function code, and then try to pick the primary use of funds as parent involvement activities, you will get an error. because remember, parent involvement activities is a function code 331. So that is an error that is set up in Title V. Next. So there was some updates to errors, the errors that are in the system for Title II and IV. It says to prevent private school transfers. And what that means is that if you're transferring Title II or Title IV to Title I, you have to create school level budgets. You can't just use a primary use of funds and drop down and say Title I. So if you do need to transfer 2 or 4 to Title I and you don't know how to create a school level budget, there are directions in the View Edit screen, but your consultants would be more than happy to help you with that. Something to keep in mind here when we're talking about transfers. I'm sorry, Laura, this one's a little long. Some get confused about the transferring of funds. I know we use the word transfer, but our cash management system doesn't truly allow for a real transfer. So if you're telling me that Title IV is going to be transferred to Title I, the money does not move in the cash management system. It stays in Title IV. You are using it like Title I, and you will build school level budgets for Title I in Title IV. So for business and program people alike, the money does not move. Although we're using the word transfer, it doesn't transfer anywhere. You are just using the money like. The last point on this screen, and this gets confusing, it took me a minute to explain it to some of my districts last year, but a reminder for this year. If you are transferring funds, that transfer has to be discussed with the private schools before it happens. That's why the Equitable Services Worksheet has to be done first after your consultation. If you do transfer from 2 to 1, then your private school will get less Title II money, but more Title I money. All of that private school service or share will show up in Title I. It will show up in the fund that it's transferred to, or show up in the fund that it's used like. The worksheet will do the work for you. It will show you what the total amount is. The private school share will all show up in Title I, and that's the amount that should be budgeted in Title I. So again, if you have questions about that, please work with your consultant and we will help you through that. Okay, I think we're on the question screen now.
Yep. So there's a question, can private school letters be sent via email?
Currently, we've been said that we can do an email with some type of an electronic signature, just to know, hopefully, that they got it. We're trying the best we can to contact them in any way. Our manager, Fred, did work with the MANS group and did encourage MANS to encourage all of the private schools to reach out with you with additional contact information, because we realize not all of them are in their buildings actually getting the mail itself. So please try to contact them. Use the EEM to get the best contact information that you have. Always try to contact the private schools at least in a couple of ways, and note that I ask my districts to keep a spreadsheet. If they do send letters, when was the letter sent? Was it returned or not? Then they email, and occasionally my districts will do a third contact by phone. But yes, the answer is yes. Try to use email and try to get electronic signatures, especially when doing your consultation document.
Another question from Brian. So we need to start reporting Title III students, I think he means EL students, in each of the 3 MSDS general collections, regardless of whether we claim a portion of the student's FTE. This means we will need core data, track their entries and exits, etc. regarding private school EL.
Kelly, are you still on?
I don't think she is.
Okay. So the answer is kind of yes. I know this is newer learning, but some of these more complicated questions we're going to have to get answered by Kelly. She did put the website in the chat. So if you want to start with the website, and then if you have additional questions, you're going to want to contact Kelly. This is a new learning for a lot of people.
I don't have any other questions in the chat right now.
Okay. I think we have a 10-minute break. Laura, do you have some kind of timer or anything, or we'll just take a 10-minute break, come back at 10:40, everyone?
10:40?
30.
10:30.
Oh, I'm sorry, 10:30. I apologize. I can't tell time. It's okay.
Yep.
10:30. All right, we'll be back at 10:30.
What? 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 Huh? What? You have the power to keep your mother safe. If you just do what I say and accept this. Okay. I'm gonna need this stuff. I'm gonna need all your security passwords and your social media.
John Zollner, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you're not muted, just so you know.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to let you know. I don't want you to say anything crazy.
Okay, are we ready to get started?
Yes.
This next section has to do with special populations information. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Michelle Kuchar, and I have all of Kent County districts and PSAs. So our first area is section 31A updates. So first, briefly, the intent and purpose of 31A, as you know, is to provide instructional and direct non-instructional support services for students to achieve regular attendance, ELA proficiency by the end of grade 3, math proficiency by the end of 8th grade, and career and college readiness by the end of 11th grade. So if you decide to apply for 31A funding, you also have to agree to these insurances, which are on the right side of the screen. And those are that you must implement a model of K-12 for all the grade levels that you service in your district or PSA. And the MTSS model must address literacy, numeracy, and comply with the Read by Grade 3 law. Now, the legislation was condensed to reflect the 5 essential components that support a fidelity model of implementation for MTSS. Next slide. The next few slides are going to cover the changes in 31A as of October 1st, 2019. The first area was in the area of accountability and redirection. The 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 fiscal consequences of not meeting the specific academic targets was removed from the law. However, although this was removed, the overall intent and purpose of what these categorical funds are supposed to do has not changed. So funds must remain focused on that 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math, college and career readiness in high school, and reducing chronic absenteeism. The next area is in the area of professional development. The total allocation for professional development has increased from 5% to 7.5% of your total allocation, and it can be used to provide research-based PD to implement a coaching model that supports the multi-tiered system of supports frameworks. The professional development must be aligned to the state of Michigan professional learning standards and integrated into your district, school, and classroom practices. It must also be solely related to the implementation of MTSS and early literacy and the Read by Grade 3 law for leaders, teachers, interventionists, and instructional coaches. Go to the next slide. Now, these changes outlined on this screen, it's important for you as districts and PSAs to understand your percentages in your at-risk population, both for educationally disadvantaged and at risk. And remember that educationally disadvantaged is a subset of your at-risk student population. So in order to use 31A funds for school security, you must have at least 50% of your students that were determined economically disadvantaged. And you cannot use more than 20% of your total allocation on school security if you have at least 50% of your students determined economically disadvantaged. In the area of school breakfast, districts should plan at the beginning of the year to use some of your funds on school breakfast supplement. Schools that meet qualifications of 20% or more economically disadvantaged must serve school breakfast. Therefore, Section 31A must be utilized anywhere from a penny to $10 per student to fund school breakfast. In the area of school-wide reform, remember this is by building, not by LEA. So a building must have at least 40% of at-risk eligible students in order to utilize Section 31A for school-wide reforms. A district or public school academy may use 31A funds it receives under this section to implement Tier 1 evidence-based practices in school-wide reforms. Again, this is new as of October 1st, 2019. Instructional and non-instructional services must also be aligned with what is indicated in your district or school improvement plans. Another change in school-wide reforms is that it must include parent and community supports, activities, and services, which may include the pathways to potential programs created by DHHS. Okay, next screen. Okay, this screen has to do with Title 1D and Title 1A neglected funds, and these funds are for youth and delinquent students that are in residential facilities run by the state. So these programs aren't real common, but some of you do apply for these funds because you have these facilities in your resident area. So prior to last year, we never had these allocations ready for you at the beginning of the year. Last year was the first year that we did have estimated allocations for Title I-D and Title I-A neglected posted on our website before the start of the school year, but we gave you some flexibility because it was a new process and the first year we were able to do that. This year, however, those estimated allocations are posted along with all the other estimated allocations. So we do expect you to have those budgets submitted at the same time you submit your Title I, Title II, and Title IV budgets. So it'll be real important that you as fiscal agents collaborate with each facility in your area for your budgets for Title I-D and Title I-A neglected if you are applying for those funds. Again, to get that July 1st obligation date, those budgets need to be submitted along with your other budgets because we do not want to see a lapse in federal funding during that period of time. So if you have any questions regarding Title I-D or Title I-A neglected, you can either reach out to your regional consultant or you can contact Dawn Carmody. She is our NDE consultant for these areas and her information will be listed at the end of this presentation. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Next, okay, thank you, Laura. Okay, for the Language Assistance Program. Just briefly, a little background about the Language Assistance Program. This was first recognized in a court case, Law versus Nichols, where the court ruled that the district must take affirmative steps to overcome educational barriers faced by non-English speaking students. This became case law and is now applicable for all English learner students. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and Michigan State Civil Rights Law, Elliott versus Larson's, also requires equal access. So any district that is receiving any federal funding, district or PSA that's receiving any federal funding must comply with this requirement to support their English learner students. And they must provide them meaningful access to the core curriculum, and they must also provide direct instruction in English language development. So the LAP screen and the consolidated application helps us consultants understand how each of our districts and PSAs are meeting these expectations using general education funds. Okay, I want to emphasize that's with general education funds, not 31A, not 41, not Title III. So for clarity, this support goes above and beyond that of what the general education teacher provides. So if you go to the next screen, Laura. Thank you. So your lab screen from last year, all the information on that will be pulled over to this year. And what you'll need to do is review that, revise it as necessary, and then up in the upper right-hand corner, you see that drop-down box. You'll need to check yes, that you have revised it for this upcoming school year. So the next screen, next slide, Laura, thank you. So what we want on that LAMP template, you want to demonstrate that your Tier 1 supports that the district or PSA is providing using general education funds in the two main components. And again, the first component is how is the district providing English language development to all their English learners? And to be clear, the appropriate level of staffing for this requirement involves a certified teacher that also holds ESL and bilingual education endorsement. Providing just a bilingual paraprofessional for English language development does not meet this requirement. Now, if you do not have a certified teacher in ESL or bilingual education endorsement, then we will want to know what your plan is as a district to meet this obligation. The second component of the lab is used to demonstrate meaningful access to the core curriculum for all your English learners. And basically, this can be obtained when general education teachers use SIOP strategies during core content classes, or it can also be demonstrated by providing a trained paraprofessional to support in those general education classes if that first component of the certified teacher in ESL or bilingual has been met. So basically, the lab description is your intentionally planned program of supports that supports these students in these two areas that I just mentioned. More support should be provided in the earlier levels of proficiency, and then the support should diminish as the proficiency level increases. And remember, this is in addition to the MTSS supports that the district already provides to English learners. So if your district or PSA also decides to apply for Title III or Section 41A funds, please make sure that you have already in place that certified teacher in ESL or bilingual education with general education funds, providing that language development to those students. Now on the lab, you can also delineate between elementary and secondary supports by just labeling them as such in your lab description. Many times they do look different in elementary than they do at secondary, and you can certainly delineate that on the screen. Okay, we can move to the next slide. Section 41. So Section 41 funds are state funds to support English learners. And this year, most districts received quite a large increase in their Section 41 grant. As a reminder, all program reports are due in MEGS Plus on July 15th, 2020. So this upcoming July 15th, those Section 41 reports are due. This year, the description of the evaluation is optional. Many districts' PSAs are predicted to have unspent funds because of the way that we finished school year from home this year. So if you have a big fund equity there and you haven't spent a lot of your funds, please create a plan to spend those additional funds formatted like a MEGS Plus budget and attach that spending plan to 2021 budget. Okay, next slide.
So there was one question from Gail. She's wondering if there's been any discussion about what the student identification worksheets are for the 31A student identification worksheets, what they'll look like in the fall without state assessments. I don't have an answer to that.
I don't either. We'll have to, and I don't think any of our 31A consultants are on with us today, so we'll have to find out that answer.
And then Brian is asking if the Section 41 report is out yet.
I haven't heard that it's out, but I believe it's still due at the same time. I think it was in July.
Yeah, July 15th.
July 15th, yeah.
I would imagine that something will go out when that's live.
Yes. You should get notification when that's live.
I don't see any other questions.
Again, if you have questions on any of the previous areas that we've covered, just put them in the chat box and we'll get to them.
We've lost Gail.
All right. Do you want me to go ahead until she comes back, or do you want to, Andrea?
I can run through them if you want, and then when she comes back,
Okay.
I'll
All
stop.
right, go ahead.
Just a little bit more about private schools. This is your timeline for meaningful ongoing consultation. And even if you haven't served private schools in the past, this is important for you to know, because at any point in time, a private school could decide that they're going to participate with you. You could have students that end up going to a private school, either in or out of your district. So in the spring, they would provide their data to you so they can develop their application in the early spring. And then in the late spring, evaluation of current year programming and determining needs for the following year. And Gail, you're back.
Sorry.
That's okay. Do you want me to finish
Um,
the slide and then take over, or do you want to take over? We were just
I'll
talking.
take over.
Okay. All
Yeah,
yours.
you know, those phone calls wait till just it's your time. Okay, well, part of this that happens before, of course, is that your letters of invitation, your private school letters of invitation, and I'm not talking about the ESSER ones, those are separate and different. And those also should be going out with with your consultation for ESSER, but this is the regular letters of invitation that you send out, usually the beginning of May. So if you haven't sent them out, a lot of people send them out in February, March, April, but actually the state code talks about May, the first week of May. And of course, you want to know that information before you complete your budget for your Title I budgets and Title II and IV if applicable. So you want to know how much, if private schools are interested. And again, you can go to the EEM geographical search, just type that in, and you put in your school address, and I hope most of you know how to do that. If you don't, please contact your consultant, because it's a real quick, easy way to know that you're not missing any private school within 30 miles of your district. You also, if you know of any students that are going to a private school that would normally be going to your school district in a Title I building, you also are obligated to contact that school and invite them to participate. So now we're ready for consultation. If you've got the letters out, you know who's coming. You've set a deadline in the letters and you contacted them at least twice, as Shelley mentioned, by phone, email. Some people send certified mail. They just want that documentation. So now you're ready for the consultation, and they need to bring, you know, these are all the steps Xander started going over. The steps that you need to take and what time of the year, and it's really basic. If you have a question on what's going on or they have a question, time to have a consultation. And we do ask that you record those, that you document those, and that, some people just keep a notebook, some people electronic notes, Google document, whatever you want or have, so that if there's ever a time that there's a question on services or who's supposed to be doing what, you will have that ready to talk to the ombudsman about. We hope it never gets that far. You know, if you have really good consultation, and you can involve your consultant also to help work on that, we should be all good. Fred Williams, by the way, is the interim ombudsman right now. Next slide, please. And then we talk about what is meaningful consultation. And private schools should bring this information with them. The numbers of free and reduced lunch students who reside in the LEA's Title I residential school areas. And then their total student population numbers, because you'll need those for the formula. And then the LEAs are ready to move forward on the estimated allocations for all of these areas that the private school may wish to participate in. They don't have to participate in everything. They can choose to do that. And we do have private schools that only do Title I or only do Title II or IV. So again, that's something to discuss with them. Again, if you if you have questions, ask the consultants, and we will be glad to help you figure out how to support your private school students and your private schools. And of course, the last bullet is about what do you all agree that the services should look for the students? What can you do for them that is the best thing that you can provide with the amount of funding that there is? When will it start? Where is it going to be? You know, who's going to do it? And of course, you would always remember that you do not pay the private school anything. If it's a teacher from your district, of course, you pay your person through your school district. And then if it's someone else or a vendor, you pay the vendor or a person that's contracted through the public system, never to the private school. Next slide, please. Again, more with meaningful consultation. This, again, as we said before, it used to be years ago, you'd have one consultation and then everybody's supposed to know what they're supposed to do. And of course, that did not always work so well. You have to remember to do, again, meaningful consultation during amendment time, December 15th to January 15th. Funds could increase, so then you'll need to revise also the equitable services worksheet. Excuse me, has been mentioned before. The LEA is the one that's responsible for ongoing monitoring of the private school program to help ensure, that everything is going well. You might make an agreement and there's a private vendor involved or a teacher that is working with the student, and then that person, something happens and it does, the services don't, and maybe the public school doesn't know about it, the private school didn't know, and then it's still the public school's responsibility to make sure that the students are getting served. So you need to, it works together. You work together to help make those decisions on what happens next. Again, down to the detail of how is the student doing? Are they making growth? How are you assessing them? What results do you have to show an improvement in services? We used to have a manager and she always was like, these are all our kids. Many of these kids return to the public schools. But even if they don't, we consider them to be all our students and they have access to this funding. And we want them to be able to improve just like we do with all of our students. And there is even a dispute resolution procedure that if it ever gets to ombudsman or consultant level, then we talk about how do we resolve this issue and make sure that things come out, things come out well, the money is spent, it's spent equitably, and that we're getting the best services that we possibly can for the children and the staff that we are working with. Okay, next slide, yeah. And that's really all for private schools.
There was a question if private schools have a training they attend so they know what to ask. And Tracy, I know that the Man's organization has offered trainings and MDE has as well, but the consultation document you have to use takes you and the private school through all the questions that need to be discussed. And
that is on our MDE website. And there's a whole page on working with private schools and documents. So I really encourage you to use that. And also Fred has mentioned that Fred has done a lot of work, and so did Terry before she went to another position, on informing the private schools of their rights and the resources that are available to them. So you may, when you send your letters of invitation out, you may get some new customers this year. And again, if you have questions, contact us, read all the documentation and resources on our private school page. Feel free to call, to talk to us. Anyway, thank you, Laura, for putting that Equitable Services website up. And there are many steps to this and some wrinkles, and so we understand that you may need assistance and support in this area. Yeah, and Andrea's right. It is your responsibility. It's your program. You take the lead. Sometimes we expect the private schools to bring things up, but many of them are new or have changed positions, just like some of you have. So we need to work together on this. Okay. Any other questions? I'll wait for a minute. And we are ready, Michael, for fiscal updates.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Just want to begin by saying that originally when I put together the slides, albeit I used a lot of the slides from the prior year, I did incorporate some new ones, but the way they're laid out, I'm trying to take you all through a journey of what it's like to be subjected to a fiscal review. So hopefully my presentation will maybe answer some questions for you, clear some things up. If not, feel free to ask in the chat. So as you all know, the whole process of putting together a consolidated app is a collaborative venture, and it requires a lot of different people with their input. And as you'll notice, over to the left there, community is one of them, and I guess I look at it as that's really where I fall into the place in any fiscal monitor, really, is because we want you guys to spend all your money, and we're really not here to admonish you for any types of reporting errors or anything like that. We just want to help you make sure everything's reported properly and correctly so that you in turn can use that data to do any kind of planning and maybe augment some of the programs. One of the things I want to say is in the beginning is, especially for the business managers, it's very important for you to set up your budget and your books so that it mirrors your consolidated app, so that down the road, say if something was a contract, purchase some kind of service, and it should be an object code of 3,000 or 4,000, but you inputted it as supplies or materials, that becomes a misclassified cost, which basically requires us to come out the following year and make sure that you have corrected that error. And we don't really want to hound you guys. However, some of these smaller sort of inconsequential errors can build up or add up, and might feel like we're hounding you a little bit too much. So I would encourage you to set up your budgets correctly so that they do mirror that consolidated app, all the ways across for objects, and also right down to your facility, whether it be an elementary school or or the district wide. Okay, next slide, number 66. So one of the things we're looking for when we come out to do a fiscal review is we're going to take a look at your internal controls, and those in relation to allowability of cost, conflicts of interest, procurement, technical evaluation, which is related to procurement in terms of we want to see how your bidding process works, and then travel reimbursement, cash management also is another one. But the internal controls, you are required to establish and maintain effective internal controls over your federal award so that we can have reasonable assurance that the LEA is managing your federal award in compliance. And then you can get some guidance from the standards for internal control in the federal government, which is issued by the Comptroller General of the United States, or the Internal Control Integrated Framework, which is issued by the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations of the Treadway Commission. Next slide, please. So as I said, we're looking for your policies and procedures in 6 areas. One of them I had mentioned was your cash management. That's going to be related to the draws that you make for your grant award money. And we're going to want to see how the procedures of that work. We want to see segregation of duties as much as we possibly can. However, we do acknowledge that it can be more difficult in some of our smaller districts. In that case, I guess I would suggest that you get some sort of approvals from the, say, like the superintendent for your cash draws, just so that the same person isn't doing everything. Next, please. So allowability of cost is another policy and procedure we're going to see. And in terms of your expenditures, we want to make sure that they're reasonable, necessary, and allocable. In that we want to make sure that it's necessary to carry out the program, to execute all the things that need to be done. And we want to make sure that the amount you're paying for this is reasonable. And we want to make sure that it's allocable to the correct period in which you're providing the service and purchasing. And of course, obviously, we want to make sure that you're complying with state laws. We're going to require time and effort documentation. That mainly goes to your payroll for having a PARS-like or a semi-cert-like documentation to support the hours and instruction that the title people are executing. And most importantly, I mean, it's going to have to be approved in the consolidated application. So if you've made an expenditure for something that we so happen to just pick as a sample item for your general expenditures, and we're going to try trace that back to your consolidated application. And if it's not in there and we can't find it, then that's something that we would deny, and that would create a question cost for which we would then recapture. However, keep in mind you would be able to recoup that money with carryover in the following year. Conflicts of interest, another one. We just basically want all the potential conflicts of interest. We want to make sure they're documented. One of the things here, I guess, is, and it's probably going to occur maybe in the smaller offices and the smaller communities, is we recommend that staff not be supervised by family members or partners. Next slide, please. Another one, with your procurement, with the policies and procedures, want to make sure that, it's approved in the current year consolidated application. There's signed invoices or receipts of receipt of the items that have been expensed. It occurs within the allowable dates of the award acknowledgement letter. And if there's a bidding process for one of the expenditures, want to make sure that that's documented. Next, please. So one of the things with procurement is we want to make sure that the benefit is going to inure to the students in the program year for which it was expensed. That's really the main thing there. For subscriptions, we have denied for subscriptions at multi-year subscriptions, citing that it was not the benefit of that was not inuring to the students in the program for year which it was approved. So, and there might be some incentives that you might want to use. Just keep in mind that there must be an educational nature. Therefore, like trips to zoos could be are allowable. However, say trips for ice cream would not be. Just want to reiterate, I guess, that it must be used in the program year. and watch out for gift cards as well. Can be difficult to ensure that the purchases align with these guidelines. Next, please. Okay, for travel reimbursement, the main thing want to emphasize here is that the hotel receipts are required. In the past, reservation confirmations have been given to us for support for some hotel stays, and that is unacceptable. So we would need to see the reservation, or excuse me, the hotel receipt showing a zero balance that was paid. Next, please. Okay, as I said, one of the policies and procedures we do look at is your cash management, and it's all related to your disbursements. The thing we want to see is to make sure that there's support for those disbursements, and keep in mind that everything's on a reimbursement basis, so it's going to need to be expensed in your general ledger in order for you to really, for it to be allowable and allocable. So the best thing to do is really to print off a year-to-date, so to speak, general ledger, say, to support your first disbursements, and then the next one going forward, you may want to have a date range for the general ledger you're printing off, beginning with the ending date of the first disbursements support that you had, and going out to the subsequent date for which the disbursement has occurred. The dates and amounts of each draw for each of the title programs must be supported by the expenditures, as I said, at the time of the draw. One of the common deficiencies is that we find regularly is that a draw is being requested prior to the funds being expended. However, usually it's rectified in the following disbursement in most cases, is what we found. But that would be an error. Let's see. And then sometimes we do occasionally find that the total draw is more than spent or recorded in the general ledger. And that's probably more or less related to the previous bullet point where we're talking about timing. And as I said, it's all the draws should be on a reimbursement basis after the expenses have been incurred. Next slide, please. So probably don't need a question break really per se, but I guess there are some questions in the chat.
I don't see any right now, Mike.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on then. Hopefully we can wrap this up here pretty soon. I only have a few more slides left.
I think there was a clarification about the timeline slide.
Oh.
But
Oh, the timeline for private school? What was slide 60?
Yeah, it was the private school, the meaningful consultation. So I'm not sure of the question.
Could you maybe Jen, you could clarify your question?
Yeah.
Are you on, Jen?
Maybe it was that there used to be actually another slide before that we tried to, we were trying to keep our slides down that really talked about when you should send out the letters of invitation. So that's really the only addition that other slide, I think, to update the timeline. But maybe she has other questions about the timeline. The only other clarification would be that you should ask for, the deadline from the private schools, so it's well before you have to start working on the consolidated application. So many districts asked for, the beginning of June, the middle of June, at the latest, that for the private schools to respond to any requests, or you can even have it earlier. So send the letters of invitation out by the first week of May. Make sure you have a deadline, and then make sure they respond to the deadline, or you make the contacts, you take the lead, and make sure you have all their information. So
Yeah, she clarified the question in the
okay, I'm not
chat,
looking at the
so,
chat.
okay, we can move on.
Okay, the budget, as I had alluded to previously, this is where it's critical for the business manager to make sure the budget is aligned with the consolidated app. Two things that serves is as I said before, we want to make sure that you guys are spending all your money and you're not leaving any money on the table. And by having a well-constructed budget, that can help you in terms of as you're going along, you might realize that you have a lot of money in any particular area that was approved and needs to be spent. Secondly, if you happen to spend greater than 10% of something that have, 10% excess over what has been approved in the consolidated app, that could become a question cost. And however, if your budget is set up correctly, that can alert you to an overrun, which would allow you to contact your regional consultant and get an approval from them for that overrun. And therefore, if it was found during one of our fiscal reviews, that would be allowable then. But we would have to see, say, like an email from your consultant approving that. So
Yes.
it's important, that
Unless you had something a little later.
it's important that your general ledgers provide the state account codes. And again, that's important in terms of when you're booking things. Just make sure that things are booked to the correct codes, for whether it be for object or say facility. If something is purchase service, let's say, is erroneously coded to supplies and materials, that again would create a misclassification, and that would require us to come out in the following year to make sure that you've corrected the problem. And again, when you're setting up your budget, if it's being set up correctly with correct function codes, correct object codes, correct facilities, and obviously correct grant, that's just gonna help you as the year progresses, make sure you're not making any entries into, say, something that doesn't have a budget, and therefore it's gonna eliminate a lot of errors that we may find down the road as we come out to visit you guys for a fiscal review. And really, that's where a common deficiency is, when the actual expenditures exceed the amount approved in the application by more than 10%. And that, again, there, if you've set up your budget, you'll see that early on, in which you would have the option or the opportunity to contact your consultant and get approval for that. Next slide, please. Okay, staffing. Staffing is an area that we review, and really the things that we look for are that the person is appropriately placed, and that used to be highly qualified. We want to make sure that they're been subject to a background check, and keep in mind that if you have some folks that are contractors, maybe through edu staff or something, substitutes, you want to make sure in that contract somewhere it's stipulated that they have executed a background check on the person that will be coming into your schools. And then in terms of being the highly qualified or appropriately placed, the things that are sufficient for that we're going to want to see are to make sure that you have a Michigan teaching certificate, or another thing is 60 hours in college, an associate's degree, or passage of the MTTC, which used to be the old work keys. I believe since 2017, it's been changed. However, you can grandfather people in. The work has to be documented. We're talking about time and effort documentation here, and this is one that causes a lot of headaches for folks at the district. And really, it's the PARS documents, and the semi-certs aren't specifically required. However, all the information that is contained in those, that time and effort documentation, will make you compliant. So if you are currently using the PARS or the semi-certs, we suggest that you just continue using those, and that will allow you to remain compliant. Next slide, please. Okay, as I said, all background checks are required. We're going to want to see an iChat, or can't think of the code right now. It's kind of escaping me, but TNS, I believe, or something along those lines. If anybody wants to help me out, you can chime in at any time. But and then again, back to the appropriately placed, for paraprofessionals, making sure they have an associate's degree, they've completed 60 hours or passed that MTTC test, as I had mentioned earlier. And the work keys is no longer acceptable, I believe, like since 2017. However, they can be grandfathered in. So if they passed the work keys and it was prior to 2017, they're still working, the work keys would be sufficient. Next, please. As I said, time and effort, it's where we find a fair amount of errors. And just keep in mind that you'll hear that the PARS, the personnel activity reports are not specifically required, nor is the semi-annual certs, but the information that is in them and with the frequency that they need to be completed, that will keep you compliant. So if you are using those, please continue to use that. And also keep in mind that this is a little bit different than the kind of documentation that you need to provide for your program, which would be your consultant. So if you want to go on, we can go on and continue here with the next slide. This is really, I believe, when I was referring to so the time and effort documentation, and this is where all the things that are necessary to keep you compliant. And just keep in mind, if you're using the PARS or the semi-certs, just continue to use so, and you will be in compliance.
Michael, this is Shelley. Can I add something from the on-site review perspective, please?
You may.
Thank you. When we come for an on-site review, we're looking for activity logs as well. So just showing us a semi-cert because someone is fully funded title is not everything we need to see, because we need to ensure that everything that person is doing is allowable and meets the intent and purpose of the law. So please make sure that there's some type of activity logs, which a PAR can be an activity log. But if you just have a semi-cert, that could be an issue. But a district would want an activity log as well to help track your programming. You'll know who you're serving and in what area you're serving. That way you can check the academic achievement of those students and determine whether or not an adjustment needs to be made to instruction. Thanks.
Thanks, Shelley. Next slide, please. Okay, so payroll, again, we're going to want to make sure that these folks are approved in the consolidated app and for the amounts that they are approved at. Just keep in mind that if you go 10% over, there's going to be some question costs. And we're going to be, when we're reviewing your payroll, we're going to be verifying that your salary and benefits of your staff were directly charged throughout the year and agree to the amounts approved in the consolidated app. Again, want to make sure that they're charged to the appropriate function and object codes. Sometimes I found some errors where people, the business manager is a little confused as to whether or not it should be in the salaries and benefits columns of the object codes or purchase services. Purchase services would be where you have a contractor and at the end of the year, you're either giving them a 1099 or if they are really actually employed by some sort of, like EduStaff or something, that's a corporation. They've submitted their I-9 to you stating that they're a corporation and don't have to send the 1099 to that contractor, whereas a direct hire is going to be included in the payroll and benefits columns. So that's the main thing that I've seen in terms of have some erroneous findings. So next slide, please. In terms of general expenditures, just make sure that, again, these things are included in your consolidated app and make sure that they are booked in accordance with the consolidated app. Just make sure you're getting your correct object codes and as well as your function codes, obviously, and facilities. That's most important in your Title I, but these are the types of errors when we find when incorrect object codes are, when they're very sort of ticky-tack errors, just oversight. However, it does necessitate us coming out the following year. And again, one of the things we find is sometimes that there can be some overspending and anything in excess of the 10% of what's approved on the consolidated app would be a question cost. And again, this is where the budgeting can be helpful, where if you see this is going to be occurring, you can get ahead of the curve and give your consultant a call, get approval for that overage, and just make sure you get an email or a letter of some sort of documentation that's been approved. So if it does happen to be part of one of our sample items, we can allow it, having seen the correspondence from your consultant. Next, please. Purchase services. We see this in professional development, where we're going to want to see a contract, and there are some certain elements of a contract that we're going to want to see. And those being the signature of both parties, the scope of services are detailed and understandable. The compensation is well defined and clear. There are termination provisions, and the duration of the contract is well defined. Purchase orders. Some districts tend, for some reason, have thought that purchase orders are sufficient for purchase services of this nature. But the problem with that is they many times the purchase orders do not include all of these elements that we like to see in a contract. A purchase order can be used for, say, like a renewal of a subscription or something of that nature. But generally speaking, purchase services are usually a little higher expense amounts. And so we really like to see contracts for those. And also in regards to the training and the professional development that is conducted in-house, additional documentation and support, we're going to want to see our sign-in sheets as well as an agenda. Next slide, please. And I'm not sure if this is the last slide or not, but one thing is, the final expenditure report, which is due on November 29th of each year. Everything that's in your general ledger should tie out exactly to your FER. And if there are any kinds of errors in that, those are what we call variances, and that also will necessitate a follow-up review. Okay, next please. And equipment. Equipment, we're going to want to see an inventory listing of all your equipment purchased with federal awards, and things that we want to see on this inventory list are the date that it was purchased, a description of the item, the cost, where it's located, some sort of numbering system, whether that be a tag number or a serial number, works as well, although it's not required. We're going to want to know who the vendor was, the funding source, use condition, and if it's disposed of, we would want to see the date that it was disposed. And I believe you have to keep that on this inventory list for 5 years afterwards. And then, of course, when we do this, get to the equipment section, we're also going to be doing a physical inventory of your equipment. Depending on how much equipment you have, we may only take a sample and just check on a few of the items. If you don't really have that much equipment, then generally we'll just use 100% sample and verify that. But we will always verify the new equipment that you've purchased in that year's particular program year, and make sure that it is present. And so I think that is the last slide. Thank you, everybody.
There's no questions in the chat.
Okay.
That's what I like to hear.
We can review the contact information slides. You can go through those, Laura. First one is basically our management contacts, and then we have public school academies and regional support, which is us, and school improvement. In special populations unit is Michelle Williams, and then on the next slide is the rest of the populations and regional consultants.
Can you go back? One
Yeah,
second?
that phone number is wrong. Yeah, thanks, Shelley. That phone number should be 241-6970. It's correct on the next screen, but on this screen it's wrong. Yep.
Are there any other questions that anybody would like to have answered before we leave?
If you do come up with any questions, certainly feel free to email us, your regional consultant, or any one of us, or any of these contact people on our contact information here.
There was one question. I see you're recording the session. Where will this be housed? Are we adding this to the bit.ly?
That's the plan. There should be 2 recordings in the end that will be added to the bit.ly.
Yep, Laura put that in there. Yep.
Oh, okay. And then please remember, if you didn't go to the bit.ly and sign in, to please click the sign in and include your PIC number if you'd like sketches. And then also there is an evaluation there that we'd love for you to do.
Jen is asking if the slides will be updated on the bit.ly.
No, we can't do that. So that one phone number is incorrect.
Right.
It's 241, not 243.
Laura put
this
the link to the dashboard in there again. So you can link to that and then save that. And that looks like that's all for questions.
And this PowerPoint that we presented is also posted on our website. And I'll put that in the chat box.
Thank you for joining us today, everybody, and for taking your time out of your morning. I think that's all. Right, team?
Right.
Oh, Barbara's asking if we would repost the bit.ly link. Barb, if you scroll up, you should see it. But I can send it to you too. Oh, there it is. Thanks, Laura.
I already had it copied, so it was easy to paste it right
Laura's
there.
good.
Great. Someone
I
asked
tried.
where you sign in.
Yes.
If you go to the bit.ly, you'll see the sign in link there. It's actually a Google form that will come up. So don't let that confuse you. Some people were confused by that. It's not just a sign in sheet. We can't post the bit.ly on the OFS website. The bit.ly is something that we did just for our region, and there's a whole lot of red tape hoops to jump through to get something posted on the website. But I can, I'll probably be sending it out to everybody again too, at least in my area. And your consultant can get the link to you too, if you need it again.
And just a special thank you to our ISD host, Laura Otten. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, anytime.
Have a great day, everybody.